Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry.
And I'm Irene.
Today we're going to give you some additional footage from yesterday's planting when we planted, actually I planted, some radishes and spinach.
Right.
Now what we're doing today is I'm going to take you outside, we'll go in the greenhouse, and we'll take a look at that bucket. Just a bucket. It has dirt in it. Well, it has
dirt.
Damp dirt.
Damp dirt.
It's potting soil. I'll show you how we test the moisture content in the soil with the back of the knuckle. How do you do it, Irene?
First I look at it, but then I just touch it with my fingers, and I usually use the palm of my hand, but it's just a matter of feeling. I know that in our environment, moisture is going to make it feel cool, and I will touch the surface, and then I will scratch under the surface where I know there's no seed. And see, because one of the problems you have sometimes when you're watering is you'll wind up, and a perfect example of this, one of our neighbors years ago said, I'm watering my tomatoes every day, and they're just doing terribly. They're dying. What's wrong? And I said, you're not watering them enough. She said, I'm spending all this time out there every day. And a couple of weeks later, I saw her, and she said, you know, I was watering again, and I was thinking about what you'd said, and I scratched down, and all that water I'd put on was going down less than an inch.
So it wasn't reaching the root ball.
It wasn't reaching the root ball. And you have to be certain that the water you're putting on top of the pot is actually getting down into the pot.
Yeah. So Irene and I have different kinds of skin. She has dry skin and I have almost oily skin. So when she puts her palm down on the soil, she can feel the dampness quite easily. When I put my hand down on the palm on the soil, it doesn't feel quite right. When I flip my hand over and let my knuckles rest on the soil, I can tell the difference.
The back of your knuckles is always the sensitive part here because you develop calluses here. So for a lot of people, there's it's a much more
no calluses here.
Right. There's much more sensitivity to the back of the fingers. And if you don't feel like you're comfortable with that, you can use those moisture detecting machines.
Some of them work well, some of them don't work so well. Mostly they don't work very well in our soil. So part of this is you have to know your soil. But I think as a beginning gardener, you start off using your hands and your other senses to determine how much moisture there is. But those sensors that you plug into the ground and it tells you how much humidity is in the soil works based on an electrical principle. And what it does is create some amount of current flow in that meter, and that meter senses it and tells you how much moisture you have.
Right. And so I think it's not a bad backup for people who feel really uncomfortable.
I don't feel uncomfortable. It's easy.
No, I don't think it's easy, but there have been times when I felt a little bit more comfortable using a machine like that just to kind of give me a backup feeling.
But first, I want to talk about learning things. You know, somebody asked me this morning, why is doing this kind of an experiment important? Well, it's really pretty simple. If you keep a notebook of what you're doing and when you're doing it, and anything that you see that might be out of the ordinary, if you're a first-time gardener, write it all down. You'll eventually figure out over time what to ignore. But by keeping track and doing multiple of these experiments as quickly as you can, you'll get a better understanding of how seeds germinate and how they come up.
Right, and sometimes when you're first starting, you don't even know what to look for. Let's be blunt. I mean, if depending on your eyesight, you might not notice little teeny tiny bugs or something like that.
Well, if you wear bifocals like I do, you may have a few other issues.
Well, I have progressive bifocals. He has just 2 focal lengths.
I have line bifocals.
And we get into arguments all the time because I'm saying, can't you see that? And he's like, no, I can't. And that's a problem. It really is. I mean, sometimes people who are serious gardeners will carry a small magnifying glass or something like that with them in order to discern exactly what that critter is in there that's eating your stuff. I have to admit, the first time we ever encountered thrips here,
Who would have thought?
I just didn't ring bells as to what the heck was causing the problems, because they were so tiny, and it was when the light shined on them just exactly right in the greenhouse so that you could see them.
And you could see through them too.
Right. Well, they're slightly translucent, but it was like, they look like little specks of dust. In fact, they're smaller than a lot of dust. And you're like, that's what the problem is. Okay, now I have to catch one or two and look at them up super close with a magnifying glass and track them down. But you know, we didn't even know where to start at first, because you're like, something's eating this plant, but I can't see anything.
When you see things like this, you'll start getting an idea about what's going on.
Right. And then also, if someone asks you a question, did you notice such and such? You can go back, I don't know, let me go check. And you can go look at your notes. Were you seeing a specific pattern on the leaves? Were you seeing a specific pattern in the soil? What's going on?
And you know, there's nothing better than having a camera with you and taking pictures. But you have to know when the pictures were taken and what you were taking them of and why. So just put a little note in your notebook, and that way you can go back and say, oh, I remember exactly what that looks like now. Because you know, people's memories are funny. You think that you see something a certain way, and then you go back and you look at it. No, you didn't.
Smartphones are actually a huge bonus that way, because most of us have them glued to us all the time. And actually, smartphones can zoom in amazingly close and get pictures. I mean, I've identified several bugs over the last couple of years because I was able to zoom in close enough with them that I could get enough detail that I could actually take it to the internet or go on one of the Facebook groups where they ID bugs for you and find out what something was.
Well, you know, there's over 5,000 types of aphids.
Right.
And 5,000 types of little teeny insects. Who'd have thought about that? But if you're trying to actually get down and find specific ways of controlling some of these pests, you really need to know exactly what you're working against. He didn't find any truffles the first day, so he decided, well, I'll have to give that pig more of a chance. So he took the pig out another day. In the meantime, he fed some more truffles to that pig. And the second day, he didn't find any truffles either. Or the third day, or the fourth day, or the fifth day. To give that pig more of a chance. So he took the pig out another day. In the meantime, he fed some more truffles to that pig. And the second
It was hard not to snort when you were doing this. Because I've heard this story over a beer a dozen times.
If you're going to be persistent, you need to be persistent in a smart way. Don't be dumb.
Right. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again and again and expecting something different to happen.
The trick here is you want to not do the same thing every single time. If you find that your results aren't coming out the way you want them to work, do something a little different. Now, in the case of George, he actually was yes, he's a real live person. I've changed his name because, well,
Names have been changed to protect the guilty.
I don't know if he's still with us, and I wouldn't want to embarrass him in any case. But take the case of George. He's trying to find truffles in the middle of a pine forest.
Yeah, truffles don't grow in pine forests.
So one of the things that you really need to be persistent about is growing something specifically that will work in your area. Not everything's going to work every place. No. Yeah, you can grow things that shouldn't grow in your area. We're doing some of that here, but that's because you know what the parameters are. You know what makes it work and what makes it not work. And some things that you've grown for years, all of a sudden, might not work anymore.
Right. Well, years ago, a girlfriend gave me a lantana plant. Now, lantana is a beautiful flower, and I adore it. Absolutely adore it. And what she had found is she'd found a cultivar named Irene. And I did think that was way cool. She ran into it at some garden center and bought it and gave it to me for my birthday. And I loved it. And I managed to keep it alive for 2 years. But we're too cold. You know, the only way I could have really kept that alive permanently was to bring it into a conservatory or something like that. It's just we are too cold here. And I did all the things you can possibly do. I buried it in leaves. I did all that kind of stuff to try and keep it safe. And I managed to get it through 2 winters. And the 3rd winter, it was gone. There was nothing I could do about it. So when you are pushing the extremes like that, you have to expect that at some point your luck will run out.
It does.
It does.
You don't have to make all...
So we'll be back again.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm positive. We got lots more to talk about, but we didn't want to keep the people up all night. So, well, they might have other things to do. Nah. So until next time, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.